All right, guys. Well, again, thanks y'all so much for attending today's basic training. Today, we're going to cover program management, going through all the different features that DroneSense has to try to make your job a little bit easier. For those of y'all who don't know me, my name is Brandon Karr. I'm the DFR Solutions Engineer for DroneSense. I ran the Pearland Police Department's drone program since its inception in 2017. Was a full-time admin over the program the last 2.5 years that I was with them. Now I work full-time with DroneSense. So we're going to talk a lot about Pearland's program. I'm going to show y'all the guts of Pearland's program as well. So it's not me showing you DroneSense East, which I'm sure almost all of y'all, if not all of y'all, have seen the inside already. But I'm going to show you what an actual agency's program looks like inside, so that you can kind of get some ideas on how it might best also suit your agency and how you may want to implement some of those taskings. I'm going to do my best to monitor the Q&A as well. If you have any questions, please put it into the Q&A and I'll try to get to those as they populate. I'm the only panelist in here today, so I'm going to try to watch it. But please do not hesitate to ask any kind of questions that you have. I'll be happy to help field those for you. All right. So let's get started. All right. So right out the gate, we all know what the dashboard looks like, right? This is where you can kind of see how often your people are flying. What's great about this, and what I use this as the administrator, is I got to just basically track how often my guys were flying. And then I would also post that up and send that like a real quick snapshot to our commanders so that they can see, look, not only are we busy, but we're being successful, right? Like, we are actually using these systems and flying as often as we can. So the dashboard, while a lot of people just skip right through it, it is actually kind of pretty helpful, because people can actually see, that, hey, we're flying, we're staying busy. So that's a good way to do it. Moving on down, I'm going to jump down into the flights and missions. So in the flights and missions here, this is super important as a program administrator, because this is one way that you can utilize to make sure, sorry, I had an overlay I wanted to get rid of. This is one way that you can make sure that your people are flying in a manner that is in accordance with your policy, right? So if I were to go into my last flight that I had, this was a DFR test flight that we were doing. I can go in and I can see that, all right, this flight was a 23-minute flight, but this is what I mainly looked at from an administrator's perspective, because in this area, it's a 200-foot land grid, right? So if I'm going to be flying my drones around and I end up seeing that that is over 200 feet, that's not only a training issue, but that's also something that I may want to go and have a conversation with that individual to make sure that the evidence that they collected was in accordance with the policy that we fly in, and make sure that they understand that, hey, you need to stay underneath that 200-foot land grid, right? The other thing that I look at is max distance to pilot, right? If this is going to be a flight that's going to be fairly long, you may want to start looking into getting beyond visual line of sight authorizations and things of that nature. If you're going to start flying very long distances, and that's going to be highly dependent based off of your environment in which you're going to be flying in, right? So for example, in Pearland, we have almost no elevation change. We have almost no elevation change. We don't have any type of a lot of obstructions and things of that nature. So we can see the drone and be able to deconflict the airspace from a real long way off. But your environment that you're flying your drone in may not have that same capabilities, and you may have to fly a little bit shorter. So this tells me that, all right, this flight not only was flown in accordance with UAS facilities map grid, but it also was flown in accordance with policy and legal for visual line of sight. The other thing that I take a look at, and this is going to be kind of funny because this is one of my flights, is the checklists here. So if they do the pre-flight checklist on the remote, that will populate showing that they did it. So it's incredibly important to make sure that this is done properly and that they did the pre-flight checklist. Because this was done in remote and I was a teleoperator, that doesn't populate properly. So let me jump over to this one. There we are. So this one shows that this was a pre-flight checklist, was completed. So I know that they went through and they did the pre-flight checklist. We'll talk about what that looks like here in a little bit and how you could also leverage that. to make sure that your people are doing their pre-flight checklist properly. This was a search for a suspect. This is all over the place, nice and crazy. But this is a good way to go through and double check these things. Moving on down, local weather information. I always double check wind speeds to see what kind of flights that those guys are conducting, and making sure that they're flying within the realm of their capability. As we know, there isn't a legal requirement on wind speed, but there is a legal requirement on reckless flight operations. So if it's going to be flying your drone in a much higher wind speed than the drone's actually rated, these are the kind of things that I'm watching for to make sure that my pilots are flying in a manner that is safe. Moving on up. Something else that I don't know if a lot of people have utilized this or not, but we do have that view and replay. One of the ways that I use view and replay is a couple of different methodologies. The first one that I use view and replay for, especially from a law enforcement perspective, is I'll go through, and if somebody else flew a drone for an undercover operation or and we had to be in a specific location, I'll go through and I'll re-see how they flew that drone, where they parked the drone, and what gimbal angles they used. And then I try to recreate that in the field. That way I can make sure I get the same angle that they were utilizing to not only not compromise the op, but also to make sure that we're getting a consistent feed and a consistent view for what's worked in the past. The other way that I utilize these is I can go through, and if there was a crash, I can go through and recreate the flight. Pearland had a crash not too long ago where we had a really strong wind gust and it pushed the drone into a building. The pilot had said that he didn't know what happened, right? Like, I was just flying and all of a sudden it crashed. Well, we went through and we were able to go in and see in the attitude indicator down here that there was a really strong wind gust. You could see the whole attitude of it go, and then it hit the building and fell. So that's another way that you could utilize the view and replay as an administrator. You could go back through and ensure that your guys are flying in a manner that is in accordance to your policy. Moving back to flights, this is something else that you need to pay attention to is the missions. So a lot of people do and build out these missions in a bunch of different ways. What worked best for Pearland is we built these out in types of deployment, right? So this way we had it to where if we were flying for, say, a searcher person down here, that was our number one call out. It didn't matter whether we were flying for a missing person or a suspect search. It was all a searcher person. And what this does, if you categorize it in the type of deployment, this allows you to see what type of flights you're conducting the most. And then you can gauge your training based off of which ones you need to focus on, or which ones haven't we flown in a long time that we're probably due for one and we need to up, right? So going back in, you can go and see those. If you build these out by type of deployment and not by individual deployment, you can go through and see that. So as you can see here, we have search a person. It's 221 types of deployments. And then we have a mission code, and I'll show you all that here in a little bit, linked to each one of these types of missions. And then we will give that web link to dispatch. And then whenever we got dispatched to that type of deployment, dispatch knew that that was the link for that type of deployment. And then they would copy paste that into the call notes. And now everybody that's involved with that incident has an active feed for that deployment. So that's one of the benefits of utilizing missions by types of deployment instead of individual events or things of that nature. We're also building out Texas logs to be more inclusive for other states. Right now, it's specifically built out for Texas based off of our Texas Government Code 423 requirements. But this is also something that I think every agency in the nation needs to be utilizing. If you're a fire department in here, there's a lot of stuff in here that you'll never use, but there's a lot of other good information in here that you definitely could leverage towards the end of the year, especially whenever you take all the data that we do and then give that to your chiefs so that we can keep the budget flowing. A prime example of that, let's do this one. So this was a HFD grass fire assist where they called us to come in and look for hotspots for a grass fire that they had. As you can see, this was flown under Part 107. You can log that under your public COA as well. But in our policy for Pearland, we were required to fill these out regardless of what type of deployment it is. For my firefighters in the room, this is the stuff that I was saying that really won't apply to you a whole lot. However, down here in the flight synopsis, this was required for all of our pilots to type out, regardless of whether it was a maintenance flight or regardless if it was a full op deployment like this one. The reason that we did that was I want a narrative associated with every deployment in the event that we have somebody call and complain on, hey, that drone was flying over my property. Why was it looking in my backyard? Well, not only can I go back in the flight replay and look where the gimbal was looking, but I also can come back and read the narrative that my pilot typed up. If you're only doing the flight logs and not having narratives associated with those, then you're going to be up a creek eventually. So make sure that your guys are filling out a good public narrative. A lot of times my guys would just copy paste that into a supplement or the case folder for the event that they were going in flying for. So this is a good way to safeguard your pilots. This also lumps all the flights together, which is really nice. If you don't have this turned on for your agency, get with your sales reps. This is just a simple click box. It doesn't cost anything extra. We can get this turned on for you. What's also really nice about this is this actually ports out at the end of the year. So you can, or excuse me, at the end of the year, you can go through and export the CSV, and then you can have all of that data and you can make it look really good at the end of the year. So Eric asked a great question. He said, so every flight gets a narrative for every mission. Example, a 12-hour SWAT deployment with dozens of individual flights. Yes. So it wouldn't be an individual narrative for every individual flight. That's the great thing about the Texas log. So going back into the grass fire, right? This was a 40-minute flight with 2 different deployments. So we have 2 different flights here, right? 1 deployment, 2 different flights. That narrative covers both of those flights. So it may be 20 flights, right? But you'll only have 1 narrative, just like whenever you go out to a SWAT event, right? You're going to do a whole lot of things, but you're only going to type up 1 narrative. You're not going to do one for every hour. So it's the same thing that you're doing here. So we do the exact same thing for 12-hour SWAT standoff. We've done the same stuff. But you just type up the narratives for that. And to safeguard your pilots. We would take that and then we would import it in. Great question. Real good question, guys. Moving on down, filing UAS NOTAMs. So I'm going to bounce to our admin portal over here. Going down into, I believe it's in settings if memory serves. Going into settings, you can go in and add in the different COAs. So here we have a COA associated here, 22-CSA 10707 COA. If you go to your administrative settings and you edit details and you add in that COA information and you have it linked with 1-800 weather brief on the other side, you can issue NOTAMs directly from DroneSense. You don't have to go to 1-800 weather brief to do that. So you just go in and add new NOTAM as required by the public COA, right? And you could go in and say, training, NOTAM. You can set the distance. This is draggable as well if you want to drag it. Let's go put one over my house. I want to drag that guy and come put it right over my house. Now I have that set. I can go in and set which team that is going to be associated with it, and then the COA that will be associated. And you have to put in an aircraft information as well. And then you can come in, adjust the start date. Let's say it's going to happen now. End date in an hour. All right. File NOTAM. And that's an easy way to do that. So that way you're going to be compliant with your waiver, right? Because if you're flying under a public aircraft operations COA, you will have to have NOTAMs filed prior to the flight if you have the ability to do that and it's safe, right? There is also a clause in your waiver showing that you do not have to do that in the interest of safety. So training is a great example of that. You can train under your public COA, but if you're going to be doing that, you have to file a NOTAM, right? So make sure that you are doing that. This is an easy way to do it, or you can go through 1-800 weather brief to do it, but we like to keep it all in here because now this is cataloged and documented that we did it, right? Coming into your people, or to go down to me. This is an easy way to also track all of your people to make sure that they are flying often, right? So as you can see here, I haven't flown in Pearland's account in a little while now. Last login was today. Last flight was back on the 14th of April. But this is an easy way to go in and see how often people are flying, right? So if I were to go in off these two, if I were to go in and look at all of our people, you can see that there's an error here that we have to get fixed, but you could go in and see that, Bailey flew last on the 11th. Trinity flew on back in April. So you could go and see how often people are flying. When was the last time somebody flew? That way you can make sure that these people are deploying their drones, or do they need to have a secondary training come up, right? So this is an easy way to do that. The other way to make sure that they're compliant with training is, as you'll see here, because I haven't flown with Pearland in quite a while, that I'm expired on a lot of my trainings. If I were to go in and attend a Pearland training again, then we could re-up these. But this is an easy way to see, all right, how are they attending training? Are they going to that training? And then you can re-up their credentials, and I'll show you how to do that in a little while. Yeah, David asked a question about how a pilot can have negative flight hours. That was an error in one of the flight recordings, the automated generated flight recordings that DroneSense had. And so that's that's a ticket we have in there. So we've had both sides over the years. We had one pilot who had 300 hours on a single flight. So unfortunately it happens from time to time. But this is an easy way to go in and see if your pilots are flying, when the last time they flew, what drones that they are flying, all of that information easily documented for you. But this is what I primarily looked at was, are they up on their training? Are they attending trainings? And when was the last time they flew? Because in the event that they get a call out, I know that, hey, he may not remember what all he needs to do because he hasn't flown in a month, right? So this is an easy way to look at that. Coming down into trainings. So we built this out for our agency. You can build this out for yours. This was a huge component of ours. We were required by policy to attend certain trainings every so often. Pearland trains every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. We also open the fourth Wednesday of the month out for everybody. So in the event that you want to attend a training with us, or with Pearland, you all are more than welcome to attend. Just reach out to Pearland to be able to attend those trainings. But for example, we tracked all of our Part 107 information. So all of our guys, we just make it training expires, right? And then you can go in and edit this to whatever you want it to be, days, weeks, years. And that way you know that this is going to eventually lapse. Moving on down, you can see how often people what their currency looks like. So Kathleen is going to need to update her Part 107 here to do her free and unfailable recurrency here in the next month. If we were to scroll on down, you'll see that mine is expired because I haven't updated mine. But you can go in and renew them. So let's say that I did my Part 107 recurrency back in, let's see, I did mine in February. Let's say it was around Valentine's. If I were to go in and save it, and then it will populate myself up here. So now I'll be current. So that's an easy way to do that. And you can track your people. Again, that also shows up on their flight card, their pilot cards. So you'll be able to go in and see if they're up to date on their currency. If they don't have all of the dots, that tells me they haven't been attending certain trainings. So that is an easy way to do that. One of the things that I tried to do, they made some adjustments in here since I left, but if you'll notice, I try to do different photos for every different training. And the reason that I did that was if I were to come back into here, you can see that it's easy to see that, Misty is up on her Pix 4D. She's doing good there. She also has her Part 107 is current. You can see that she is good on those. So if you do different photos for different flight card or for different training credentials, it makes it really easy to see what they're up on or not up on. But build these out. So like for example, our guys, they were required to do their NIST qualification Every year to the LEDA standard, Law Enforcement Drone Association standard, we were required for our fire department to do the NIST certification in accordance with NFPA 2400. We also were required to do night operations every 120 days, search a person every 120 days, crash crime scene reconstruction or mapping training every 120 days. And that was in accordance with policy. So that's how we built that out. That's how we made sure that our guys were always up to date on their training, so that whenever they did go out and do a deployment, they knew what they were supposed to go do and the terminology was all properly situated. Any questions so far, guys? Don't be afraid to drop them into the questions and answers. Going into your drones. So this is an easy way to go in and check the maintenance of your program. You can go in easily and see, all right, that matrice has 298 deployments already on it. So I can tell you what, coming up on 300 cycles, we're going to probably need to start looking at the motors on that thing, definitely do some prop changes if they haven't already. But it needs to have some maintenance done to it, right? So that's an easy way to go in and see, what does my drones, what kind of maintenance does these systems need to have? And which ones do I need to keep an eye on, as well as flight time, right? You can see that our M300 and our M30 are our workhorses, especially with DFR. Our workhorses is the M30 now. This is an easy way to go in and see those. So if I were to go in and click on this one, another thing that you can note is you can check the firmware. You can double check that against DJI and make sure that this is up to date. That's one thing that I constantly checked, because I may not be the person doing the updates, because this may be assigned to somebody or somebody may be utilizing at the time. This is an easy way for me to go in and double check these things. Don't forget that you can log all of these or editable fields, so that it'll help you track all those things. This is an easy way to make sure that you have your stuff up to date. The other thing that you'll want to note is that because this is a 1581 Foxtrot on the flight controller serial number, that tells me that this is already RID compliant. So when September 16th rolls around, in the event that it actually does go through on time, I know I don't have to worry about this drone, right? So that's an easy way that you could go in and double check those. Same thing with the Mavic systems, Mavic 3Ts, good here, flight controller or FAA registration. We also added a notes issue to Misty Langdon. So if Langdon came through and she said, hey, my drone's acting up, we need to pull it out of service, I can do that. I can go straight through and see which one's assigned, and then I can pull it and then do the maintenance and whatnot on it. Easy way to do these. Going into batteries, this is an easy way to go through and see what type of budget requests I need to do for the next year, right? So going in, if you go in and adjust the filter here, you can filter by highest amount of flight hours. And you can go in and see, all right, this battery here has 70 hours on it. We need to retire this battery. You can go in and see that the A set on the M300 has a 100 deployments on it. So we'll probably need to pull this one as well, because of the cycle count. So this is what I typically would go in and look at and see how often these batteries are being utilized. And then in the next budget year, I'll go in and say, all right, I need at least one Mavic battery. I'm going to need at least, looks like two. Yeah, it looks like I'm going to need at least two M300 batteries. I'm going to probably go ahead and order another M30 battery set as well. So this is an easy way that you can go in and check those sets. All right. This is something that we didn't build out. It's something that we should have, but you can build out a full-blown maintenance schedule on this. And what's great about this is this will flag your drones, letting you know that, hey, I need to do X amount of maintenance to whatever platform. So it makes it really easy to build these. You just add a new schedule, and then you can name it whatever you want, M3T maintenance. Right? You can go in, select which teams you want it to apply to, who should have performed this schedule. We'll set it to Michael Arnold because he's over the maintenance side of the house. We can set it up to say, all right, every so many flight hours. Let's do 20 flight hours. When the schedule starts today, select hardware, drone. And then you can go in and add to it, right? Select the hardware associated with it, 300. There we are. Save maintenance program. And now this maintenance will be in here, right? And so now he will have to do these, the maintenance on this platform every 20 hours. And it doesn't have to be hours. It could be cycles. It could be days. It could be whatever you want it to be for your program to make sure that maintenance isn't getting overlooked for the drone program, right? So it makes it super easy to be able to go in and do that. And then not only will Arnold get flagged now whenever he's coming up on that 20 hours of maintenance check, it also will log that in all of the notifications that get sent out in the emails. Okay. You also can go in and build out the schedules for these. This makes it super easy to go in and say exactly what needs to happen for this one, right? I want to go in and double check the H20 firmware is up to date. Make sure that you check it. You can go in and do prop replacements. You can do hull checks, battery checks, all of that information to whatever you want. That can be as robust or as finite as you'd like it to be. The manufacturers have maintenance protocols now built out. So you can go in, if you want to follow that same maintenance protocol, you can build them to mirror those. And that way you can make sure that your platform and all of your drones and all your batteries are being maintained in a proper way. And then you can also see what the historical side of the house looks like for these systems. There are a lot of different resources out there that you can utilize. LA Fire Department has an entire build out on theirs that you can leverage as well for theirs. So that is directed in policy to look up how often everything should be done. Again, the FAA is going to request that you leverage manufacturer guidelines. However, not all manufacturers actually have a maintenance program developed. DJI does. They have a really well built out program for that. That is not a bad one just to mirror across all platforms, regardless if it's DJI, Autel, Parrot, whatever. So go in and take a look at those and then have somebody make sure that that is being done properly. If you don't have a well-built maintenance program, for example, and here we don't have it built out into this, but we did catalog that in the back end because maintenance wasn't fully built out whenever I was doing it. You can go in and make sure that those are being done, because in the event that you have a failure, and if it ends up hurting somebody or being a reportable crash, the NTSB is going to do the investigation on that, and they're going to want to see your maintenance records. And they're going to make sure that you are maintaining those drones in a manner that is in accordance with manufacturer's guidance. Because if you don't have any of that documentation, or if you aren't doing that, then that does hold you liable for that crash. So you want to make sure that you have documentation to help safeguard your agency, especially if you're flying under a public COA. Moving on down into safety. This is where we would type out incident crashes that happens. I'll click on this one because this one was kind of entertaining. So we have updated this recently. So we have a couple of check boxes and things like that in here. So if these are things that you would like to update, if you think that this is pertinent for your agency, just go back in and adjust these. So what ended up happening here is we had a training event. We were flying the M300 in our drone training center that we have out there in Pearland. And one of the student pilots that hasn't flown the drone for long was doing an orbit. He went wide and he ended up tagging a light pole with the drone. So that was unfortunate. So that was the M300 crash that we had back in February 25th of 2021. What happened? We flew into a light pole. I ended up doing the report for that. So you can see here that you can adjust all of the different information here. What's also really nice here is now we can build out and say, why did that happen? Well, we had a little bit of lack of awareness, right? They didn't know where that light pole was in relation to their drone. They had lack of knowledge because that was just a student, right? He hadn't flown a whole lot. He didn't understand how long it takes for that drone to actually stop. All of that information, that's part of it too. That's probably all the ones I need to. We didn't report it to NTSB because it didn't cause any damage other than to the drone, and not a 107 report out as well. So here we can also share with the organization so that admins can see things. And then we could type up a narrative. We did a different one back then. But we put it here. The further training for pilot and command and student pilot, what we ended up doing was a recertification on NIST. It also was a training opportunity for the PIC that was supposed to be watching that individual at that time, ensuring that they are able to not get distracted and whatnot for that event. But this is a really good way to go through and backlog these. So in the event that you ended up sending that drone back to DJI for repairs, and then they sent that same drone back, right? It's important to note that while they did the repairs and it came back certified, repaired, right, or refurbished, you still want to have logs of that crash occurring. Because if you end up having multiple pilots crashing that drone over time, that's a problem. And you can go through and see how often that they're having those issues. And you can go in and make sure that that is documented properly. Another prime example, if Henry hitting a tree, recommended action was replace props, also confined space training. So this is a really good way of doing that. For checklists, we have the pre-flight checklist that's built out. Everybody has that. This is the pre-flight checklist that on the remote, when you turn it on, that little red shield that everybody ignores, that is the pre-flight checklist. Make sure that your pilots are doing that, because if they don't, it's going to log in every single flight log showing I didn't do the pre-flight check, right? You want to make sure that you're safeguarding your agency, that you're doing those accurate pre-flight checklists. Moving on down, something else that you can do is to make sure that they are doing the pre-flight checklist properly is from time to time, you can kind of test them. So if you're a law enforcement entity, just to give your firefighters a hard time, make sure that you first and foremost park in front of fire hydrant, right? And then activate it and then bury it at the top so that they know they need to park from the fire hydrant whenever they get on scene, right? But what's going to happen is when that populates, if you are not having anybody contact you saying, hey, what's up with that? You know that they're just stroking the pre-flight checklist and they're not doing a good pre-flight checklist. And that's important because whenever something bad happens and you ask them, well, did you do a pre-flight checklist? And so, yeah. And then you go to the flight log and it says none. That's a problem, right? Well, did you or did you not do it? And then if you did do it, what did you do in the pre-flight checklist? Because it's not built out easily here. But also for my police in the room, if you're doing this for your fire department, wash truck in the morning, or actually that wouldn't be right. It'd be wake up, then wash truck. So you can build those out, right? And then that way it helps kind of maintain it helps audit your program and your pilots to make sure that they're doing their pre-flight checklist properly. Friendly reminder, when everybody was going through 107, the number one cause for accidents and crashes is poor piloting, right? And that may be poor pilot pre-flight checklists or pre-flight checklists of the aircraft. If they aren't checking the hull well, if they're not checking those props well, if they're not checking that the vision sensors are functioning properly, checking weather properly. But then when the crash happens, it makes it very difficult for you to be able to go back and figure out what happened, right? So you want to be able to eliminate as much as you can. Pre-flight checklist is the first step on that. Just remember that you have an aviation program, not just flying toys around in the national airspace. Moving on down to reporting. This is also really nice. So if you're flying under a public COA, whenever your pilots are logging in, right, and they select either a mission or a training mission, they have the option to select if this is going to be flown under a COA. In the event that is flown under Part 107, we've just put in here Lance. That way I know that those are all 107 flights. In the event that is flying under public COA, then we list it. So the pilot would actually select that this is a public COA. And then you can go in for your monthly reports and backlog these, right? So if I wanted to go into June, and let's see, we try to push all of our flights to Part 107 so that I don't have to do the reports every year or at the end of every month. But in the event that you are only flying under a public COA, this makes it super easy to be able to export these out. But your pilots have to log that they're flying under the COA. So that's a training opportunity for you. Once you set the date and times, you can download the CSV. Once you download the CSV, at that point, you'll be able to go in and pull each one of those flights out. That way you can go in and now you can see that these are all the flights that were conducted under a public COA. So at this point, I can see, all right, these are all of the May flights. I need to go in and log all of those, right? So that way, at the end of this month, I can log it. That will streamline the time that you have to spend in CAPS. Instead of going in and having to filter out all of the Part 107 flights, you can isolate only the public COA flights. Coming into resources. This is where I had documentation readily available for my pilots in the field. So this is where you can say, obviously, 423 opinion. So that's the Texas Government Code 423 opinion on the definition of capture, when we can fly, when we can't fly, things of that nature. Luckily, that got ruled unconstitutional. But because Pearland is a tri-county agency, we had opinions for all the different agencies, all the different district attorney opinions on what the definition of a capturing data is. We had the standard training standards for our basic pilot proficiency, search of person standards, and mapping standards that we built out for compliance. We had all of our maintenance information in there. We had all of our registration, the COA, all the information that you would want your guys to have in the field. This is where we kept it. That way it's readily accessible to them in the event that they need it. Going into the administrative side of the house, this is where you can add and remove pilots, right? So in the event that Jeff ended up moving on to bigger and better things, I can just disable his account. It's also important to build out your teams properly. So Pearland shares the DroneSense account with all the different divisions inside of Pearland that flies. So we have 16 pilots under City of Pearland. Those are civilians, GIS, communications, capital projects, things like that, public works. And then we have the fire department who has 9 pilots, and then PD has 20. And so we have those siloed into those different teams. That way that FD doesn't see all the things that police are doing. Police can't see all the things that fire is doing unless we share those mission codes. So that's an easy way that you can build these out for each individual department. If you're an agency that is not sharing the cost or sharing your DroneSense account with the other departments, then you could also build it out to where if you don't want patrol watching SWAT ops, you can build out a SWAT team. That way the SWAT operations are always conducted under a single team. It makes it really easy to silo those out to kind of block what can and cannot be seen. Going into your roles and responsibilities, this is the basic package that comes with every DroneSense account. You can add different custom roles if you want to, for whatever best suits your agency. But going into, say, member, don't forget that you can edit these too. So if you don't want them to be able to say, I don't know, if you don't want them to be able to manually create a mission, you can go in and you can edit that. And now the members won't be able to do that. So if somebody is going in and doing things inside of your DroneSense account that you don't really want them to have that much access to because you're afraid that they may accidentally hide something or archive it, and you don't want to lose that information or have it hidden under an archive, you can go through and adjust those. There we are. Coming back into devices, in the event that you had something stolen or if you end up losing it, you can always deactivate your devices just to help clean that up a little bit. I did that with our Crystal Skies once we sunset those with the M210 series. So that's an easy way to do that as well. Going into notifications. This is also super important. So what we ended up doing is every 4 days with Texas logs, we get notifications on if they have outstanding logs. And what that means is if they have flights that they did not put into a Texas log and have the narratives associated with those, we wanted to know about it. We wanted them to make sure that there's a narrative associated with anything. That way, in the event that we get audited or whatnot, we have some type of documentation. You also can set it up to give you weekly emails if you want to set it up to do that. for UAS operations, this is where we have it set up to where if anybody turns on a drone, is how we have it set up. Arnold, myself, Jernigan, and Assistant Chief Randall will all get notifications either via email or by text or both, letting us know that that deployment is happening. The reason that we do that is a lot of times one of us is supporting command. And so we want to be able to make sure that everything is functioning properly for those critical events. It also allows us to easily copy paste that into call notes or into an email so we can push that out to everybody. Same thing with training. We want to make sure that, you know, every 30 days, we want to make sure that we are getting roll-ups on making sure everybody is compliant with training operations. In the event that anybody does an incident, we also get the notifications on that. Take a look at these and make sure that these are built out in a manner that's going to best suit your agency. If you want notifications on all these different things, then just add your email to those. For example, if we end up having a battery that goes idle, I can have it set just so I can mess with Ubri. I'm going to make a notification for him. So every single time anybody's battery ends up getting 5 days idle, he'll get a notification now. So that's going to be fun. So that's an easy way to go in and make sure that you're maintaining those batteries so that in the event that you get a deployment, you don't have a battery that's dead, right? Luckily, Pearland deploys a whole lot. So that way we know we're going to have batteries full at all times. So we don't have to worry about charging those up while we're en route. But in the event that you are an agency that isn't deploying it that often, you may want to have that activated so that you can notify you that that battery does need to get charged back up. Easy way to do that. Going back to your hardware information, though, if you're going to do that, you need to understand what batteries are what. So if you'll notice, we do not have any of our batteries labeled in the alphanumeric that comes standard with DroneSense. We want to be able to know exactly which battery is which. So what's going to happen is that notification is going to come back. It'll tell me the name and it'll tell me the serial number. And you can go through the filters and type in that serial number, filter by serial number, right? If I want to say O2 IB, I can go in and see those batteries. You can just go through and filter those. Easy way to do it. One thing that I also wanted to show is the other thing that was a hard lesson learned that I had to learn over time is you are the person marketing your drone program. If you don't market it, you don't promote it, and you don't get annoying with it with everybody, then it's really difficult for you to go in and ask for funding at the end of the year if nobody knows that you're doing anything. So scream at the rooftops about how often how great your program is. This is something that I built out. This is what I gave to Chief at the end of last year. But this is something that I pulled together. So going to 2022 at a glance, this is the data that I pulled out of DroneSense. If you're doing proper logging, if you're doing proper documentation of your missions, you can pull this data out and then easily present it. So what this shows is not only is our program successful, but we're flying more and more every single year. 2022 was our busiest year by a lot. With DFR rolling out, it's going to be even bigger. So this shows that not only are we using it, but we're using it more and more. We may want to start looking at a specialized division. This also shows how often we're flying and for what. So going on the far left-hand side over here, the PPD UAS deployments, it shows how often we're flying. It shows what we're flying for. This tells me what I need to focus our training on so that we would be the successful down the road and build out a training program in DroneSense to make sure that we audit that. And then this is what we pulled from Texas logs last year. So going back to not only are we flying a lot, but documenting the wins, right? This is specific to law enforcement stuff, but even on the fire side, right? Like these are all the different deployments that we flew. These are all the structure fires we flew where we checked the rooftops to ensure integrity, right? Or these are all the deployments we flew from hazmat where instead of sending somebody down, the blue canary, so to speak, downrange to go and make sure that it's a safe area, we used a drone instead. That saves lives, right? Like that needs to be documented and staying at the rooftops. That is what keeps the budget rolling. Right. That was my biggest job as an administrator, was promoting the drone program, pushing my guys to fly a lot. so that we could have these wins and these successes. That took me a long time to learn it, because nobody wants to be that annoying dude in the background, talking about how your program's the best, but that's what it takes, because they're not going to want to throw money at it if they don't know you're successful, right? So market it, get in front of chiefs, go talk directly to them. That's what they're there for. And then again, this recording will be made available to you. Thanks everybody for attending. Really appreciate y'all's time. Again, do not hesitate to reach out to anybody. If y'all have any questions, this is what we all love to do on a daily basis. So please reach out to us about anything, not just DroneSense related. We'll be happy to field those.